When the main focus of your game is combat, you want it to be juicy, like really juicy. Super satisfying combat is key to making any fighting game feel really good. That's why I took 2 weeks to not just create a combat system, but to make a combat system that feels juicy. I've said juicy so many times already, it's becoming the next moist, my god. Hey everyone, my name is Skit, and I'm working on a video game. And as I said before, I've been working on making my game's combat really pack a punch. And it turns out 2 weeks is not a whole lot of time to do that, but I have made what I'd consider to be a pretty decent start. Before I get into what I did to make the combat really crunch, we need to do some... Before anybody decides to rage at me in the comments, yes, I just borrowed the idea for this segment from Let's Talk Game Design. His videos are great and funny, and you should watch them. If you're unsure of what this segment is meant to be, it's basically just the other things I did that have no relevance to this video and aren't worth a video of their own portion, where I ramble about things that I did that have no relevance to this video and aren't worth a video of their own. Make sense? Good. Let's begin. I've tweaked a few of the animations, most notably the run, and also redid the idle. Now instead of staring blankly off into the distance, the player stares blankly off into the distance but looks really cool while doing it. I've also added a basic tile set, some spikes, and a breakable wall. I even started the first level, but it doesn't matter because this part is going to be scrapped and redone a few times before I actually feel like I've gotten it right. I'll probably have a video on that at some point because it's actually a much bigger deal than you may think. Now with all that out the way, let's talk game design. I might as well borrow his whole shtick at this point. Combat is one of the core mechanics of my game, so in order to get it right, I went ahead and watched a few videos on the subject, because the internet is a reliable source for everything and nobody ever makes stuff up to sound more intelligent. In the last video, I briefly covered two of the main combat mechanics of my game, namely the slash and kick. To quickly recap, the slash is a simple swing of the knife in front of the player, while the kick does a lot of knockback but not much damage. I didn't have a third move at the time, but I do now, and I'm calling it the barge. The barge, unlike the slash and the kick, doesn't make you slow to a stop, but acts more like the roll and makes you continue to move in the direction you're facing. The animation looks a bit janky right now, but all of them do, so I'll probably be making a lot of changes to them as the game progresses. Hey guys, Editor Skit here, just letting you all know that the barge is actually going to be removed. After I had written and recorded the script for this video, I got a comment from Napalm over here, who suggested a much better attack where you throw your weapon and would have to retrieve it afterwards. I much prefer this idea to the barge, so that's going to be replacing it. I've left this segment in because I wanted to show the whole thinking process for the attacks in my game, but just to clarify, the barge isn't sticking around. Alright, back to the video. After a bit of messing around with the values, I found that the knockback mechanic was kind of very broken and inconsistent. I have plans to fix this in the future, but the current system suffices for what I'm trying to do, and that's focusing on player feedback. I added a few things to the dummy here. The first is a flash for when it takes a hit, as well as a hit sound effect to confirm to the player that yes, you did in fact hit it. The second was the previously mentioned knockback. This makes it feel like there's actual force behind the player's attack. Finally, I gave the torso another texture to use once it's completely beaten up. This, in addition to the head popping off, serves as confirmation that yes, you have in fact killed it. Sort of, it's a dummy, it's not really alive to begin with. These probably sound like small changes, and that's because they are, but they do have an impact on the feel of the combat massively. The player gets immediate confirmation that they've accomplished what they've set out to do, and it feels like there's actual force behind those attacks now. The player is now able to take damage from enemy attacks. They don't die, I haven't figured out how I'm doing that yet. For now, the output just says you have a skill issue. Like with the attacks, the player also flashes when taking damage. Instead of flashing once and going back to normal, the player continues to flash for a short duration of time. This is used to indicate that the player is invulnerable. The invulnerability is there so the player can readjust themselves without getting absolutely destroyed by attacks and projectiles. I haven't gotten around to doing much sound work, but when I do, the player will also have a bunch of unique sounds to help telegraph to the player that damage has been taken. The player will also suffer a bit of knockback when taking damage. The knockback had a weird bug that I ended up leaving in because I thought it was actually pretty cool. If you're knocked back and start running in the direction you were sent, you can maintain a really high velocity for a bit before you gradually slow down. This actually allows you to exceed the maximum speed limit, meaning you can clear some really big gaps or just go super fast for a bit. Enemies are another really big component of this game. I'll probably dedicate a month or so to just making enemies, but for now there are two. The first is this guy right here, who I'm calling the barrel bomber. They fire bombs towards the player, run away for a bit, and then go back in for another round. More on the bombs later. The second is the scorpion. This is 100% what a scorpion looks like, which you can clearly see from these definitely legitimate Google image search results. The scorpion doesn't do much right now. It just follows the player around and deals damage if you get too close. There's no telegraphing yet, so there's not much else I can say about this one. It's more or less a melee test enemy right now. The previously mentioned bombs I talked about are part of a class called Projectiles. This was my first time using Godot's class system, and I've gotta say, it is amazing. Projectiles are pretty straightforward. You give them an initial velocity, weight, and a few other variables, and the class will do the rest of the work for you. This means I can make projectiles quickly and easily. There's also a bunch of signals the class uses, so for things like the bomb's explosion, you can just connect these to a script, do a minimal amount of code, and boom! Literally, it explodes. It's a bomb. Enemies are also a part of a class, but they're much more complex, so I'll cover those in their own video. The last thing I want to cover today are these here traps. There are only 2 of them, but they function flawlessly. Traps can be set off by and damage both the player and enemies, which means you could use them to your advantage or blow yourself up. The choice is yours. That's pretty much how I spent the past 2 weeks of my life. The combat isn't entirely final, but this should be a good window into how it's going to look in the future. I'll be tweaking a lot of things to get the combat feeling just right, and hopefully I'll have a combat demo out in the near future. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like so I know you liked it. If you want to see more, you can check out this video here, where I talk about programming the movement for my game, or you can check out this playlist of all the devlogs I've ever made, which is like 3 right now, but still. If that's still not enough for you, you can always subscribe. It helps out the channel, and you'll get notified whenever I upload a new video that YouTube thinks you'll like. There's also a little bell in case you want to see every upload I ever make in your notification box. Lastly, I have a Twitter. I post small updates for my games and other projects over there, so if that interests you, the link will be in the description. That's all from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.